Hello pipe community, Barepipe here. Today is part 3 of the Butz Choquin Restoration project, and today is all about how to tighten your tenons so that they can fit into your stummel. You'll recall in the beginning of this project that I showed you that this stem was loose inside the stummel and wasn't fitting very well. And I was saying that this is one of the things I was going to have to fix. Before I get into this particular pipe, let's talk principles. I've kind of crystallized in my mind that there are 3 layers of response to this problem, depending on how serious a problem you have. The first layer is, or the first level of response would be that your stem fits on the pipe, and it actually even holds itself, but you just feel like it's a little too easy to come out. It's a little too loose, and you just don't have confidence about its ability to hold the stummel onto the stem when you're holding it in an angle where you're smoking it. The response to that is a very simple one. Get a bit of beeswax, rub some beeswax onto the tenon, stick it in there, turn it around a bit, work it around in the stummel, let it sit there for a couple of days, smoke it even once or twice, let it heat up and cool down a few times. And what that beeswax will do is it'll absorb into the wood, and it'll actually expand the wood just a little bit, enough to be able to tighten itself around the tenon. And that'll solve your problem. The next level up is if it's so loose that when you stick it in on the pipe, it actually has a tendency to fall out. It wants to slip off. At that level, what you need to do is you need to expand the tenon. And you do that with some heat and a tapered metal object that you stick inside it. And as you heat it up and you push the taper in, it actually expands the tenon ever so slightly. And that's enough to make it fit more tightly. You can also just heat it up and just press it up against something that's solid, and it'll just bulge it a slight amount. And that's kind of a simple way of doing it. There is a third layer of this, and that is if you stick your stem into your pipe and it's so loose that you can actually wiggle it around inside the pipe, you're probably not going to be able to just expand it. It's probably so loose that you're going to exceed the limits of the material, and it won't be willing to expand that much, and it will simply crack. And in that scenario, what you need to do is you need to do a Delrin replacement for your tenon. In other words, drill this out, put a replacement in that's got a slightly bigger diameter, or get a new stem. This one I thought was in the second level. It was kind of there, but it was just a little too loose. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to expand this one. But then as I started working on it, I realized that there was another problem. And that was that both the tenon and the stummel were out of round. And that meant that in certain positions, as you rotate your stem, it was actually tight, and other positions it weren't. And that's a bit of a problem, because the moment you expand that, you're going to create some areas that is under much higher pressure than others, and then you risk cracking your bowl. So I had to fix that first, and that was a simple fix. You sand out the stummel on the inside with a round rod, and you just make sure that it's perfectly round. You round off the tenon with some sanding paper as well. By the time I'd done that, this stem was quite loose in the bowl. At that point, I should have stopped and realized that I actually need to do a Delrin replacement. But I was in this mindset of expanding it, so I kept going down that road. And in the end, I had to expand it so much that I exceeded the material's limits, and it ended up cracking. And it split itself right open. Now it's a useless tenon, and I'm going to have to drill it out and replace it anyway. However, there is a lot to see in this that is useful, and I'm going to show you how I did the expansion work on this, because it is good to see how it's done. It's actually maybe even better to see what happens when you push it too far and how quickly this splits open. And there's some lessons to be learned in that too. So let me show you what happens when you expand a tenon and what happens when you expand it too far. The next step in the process is now to expand the tenon. Currently, it's fitting very loosely in there, but it's turning consistently because I've rounded off the tenon and I've rounded off the inside. So if anything, it's actually a little worse now. It's quite loose. You can see there. It'll just come out. And the way you do this is to heat up the vulcanite. And then you use this little tool that I've made. And you can do any kind of tapered metal element. And you push it in while it's hot and it'll expand the tenon out. Now the trick is this. When I've done this in the past, at times the edge of this also heats up and you start losing some of your definition around this edge as it heats up and softens. And then when you try and fit it back in later, you don't get a perfect fit between the stem and the stummel anymore. Because right now you've got a great fit. So I'm going to try something. I'm actually going to wrap it up in electric tape because I want to try and prevent most of the heat from getting to the stem itself. So here's my thinking is I'm gonna wrap it up with electric tape like that. And I'm going to put a fair amount of it on it because I'm going to try, and you can see I'm just wrapping it over the edge a little bit so it kind of overlaps in. And it's just going to create a bit of heat insulation there. It's not a lot, but it's just enough that it's going to take a little longer for this to heat up than that. And that's all I'm after. I'm just trying to delay the heating of the stem itself and focus just on the tenon. And you can see I'm putting a fair amount of tape on there. Okay, so you can see there's quite a thick amount there. Okay, now I'm going to use my trusty lighter that I always use for these kind of things. And I'm going to start to just turning this over the heat. Oh, my gas is almost finished. Whoops. Starting to burn a little bit there, which is not good. And I'm just going to push this in. I'm going to keep turning it. And you can see it's gone in quite a bit deeper than it did before. Fortunately, I have actually damaged this a little bit there by just putting too much heat on it, and it's kind of just given it a slight bit of charring over there. But that's okay. We can get rid of that quite quickly because we stopped soon enough. Now, this is quite a bit tighter than it. There we go. Still quite warm. Now, one thing you don't want to do is to stick this back in there while this is still hot. So for that, I'm going to go and get a little bit of water. Okay, so got a bit of water, and I'm just going to hold this in there for a few minutes and just make sure it's properly cooled down. And now, let's just see. It's already quite a bit stiffer than it was. It needs to go a little more. And before I do that, I'm just going to go and refill my gas. Okay, let's do another round. Again, I'm just slowly heating this up, keeping it a little further from the flame this time. And we're gonna pushing this in. I'm actually going to keep that in there. Just push it in a bit deeper. And I'm just pushing this in further and further as I'm heating this up. And what it does is it's, oh, I've actually twisted my rope off a little bit. And you basically let it cool down on this so it doesn't shrink back. Okay. Just going to cool this down again. Make sure we've got all the water out. It's already quite a bit stiffer. I think it needs to go a little more. I'm using quite a bit of force to push this in deliberately because I want to, you're trying to expand this. This is quite hot right now. In the old days, I actually saw somebody once doing this where they just heated it and they just pressed it down on the surface and it just bulged it out. Trying to be a little more intentional. You can see I've gone in maybe a couple of millimeters more than I did the previous round. And now I'm going to pull it back out, cool it down. That's starting to sound pretty healthy. I'd like to give it a little more. So I'm trying to heat it without burning it. I'm actually thinking I should start going over to the next size. This one is coming close to the end of white expanding stuff. Okay. Now we're just going to let this cool down a little bit with it in it. Oh dear. And I've got a problem. I have, see there what's happening? This is cracking. That's not good. We've expanded it too much too quickly. Oh dear, that's a disaster. It's nice and tight, but it's not workable. You can see there, it may be that the vulcanite was just too old, or I maybe have been going too fast. Sometimes that happens, and that's actually the worst of all conditions. So let me just pull this off. And you can see there, that's not what you want. So there's a solution to that, and that is that we replace that with one of these, and we make a new Delrin insert for this stem. Sometimes things just don't work out the way that you hope, and that's probably a whole nother video, because I think we're going to run out of time on this video to show you how to do that. And I think the bottom line of this one is the amount that I needed to expand this by was just more than the vulcanite could handle. You can stretch the vulcanite a little bit, but if you have to stretch it too much, it doesn't work. And that's what happened here. I wouldn't trust this in the future. You could try and clamp it back together and glue it, but it's never going to be quite the same. So I'd rather just cut this off, drill a little recess, and put a new Delrin rod in there to fix it. So until next time, sorry about this. This one didn't work out, but I have managed to show you the principle of doing a minor expansion. You heat it up, you push something that is tapered in there, do a very gentle push, and I did too much too quickly, and I got in a hurry, and that's what happens, and maybe that's something to learn from as well. So until next time, thanks for watching.